co-host. Hello, good afternoon, everyone.
Hello,
Welcome. Welcome to our Thursday table talk. And this week talking about how your mind lies to you. So as always, I am thrilled to welcome all of you to the conversation. I know we do this work because we truly believe that expanding our courage, our love, and our joy is what has the power to change our world. And we also know that the power of change really comes from the power of community. And so we're so grateful that each of you, in whatever ways, have become a part of our learning community and that you're here making your small contribution to changing the world through the work that you're doing for yourself. So thank you for being here. And I'm curious how many of you are here because you already know that your mind is lying to you. Excellent. Love that. and I'm curious how you know that. So I'd love for you to drop it in the chat or to just share, but how do you know that your mind is lying to you? Anyone? Because I did the expanding you. Excellent answer, Michelle. I know because I did inner balance and it told me. That's so great. Sonia, that's awesome. My body tells me. That's great. So whenever there's that sort of tension or something doesn't feel good, it's a good indication, right? Oh, my mind says mean things that aren't true. Yes, Anita. How many of you can relate with that one? I know that it's so unkind it can't be true, right? Yeah. Oh, yes. And then there's the email we sent out that let people know as well. And Gemma says she knows because her wife told her. Also great. Kind of kidding, but also kind of true, right? Oftentimes it's the people around us who give us the feedback. Here's a great example of where feedback is so valuable. And Patricia's naming that monkey mind. Yes, we definitely all got some monkey mind going on, don't we? So as we dive into this topic, I encourage you to make sure you have a pen and paper handy so that you can be tracking your own reflections as we go through. And again, welcome and thanks for being here. And if you are watching the replay, thanks so much for taking the time to watch the replay.
Thank you, Leslie. So I have another great question for you. How much faith do you put in what goes through your mind? Just put in the chat, if it was 0 to 100%, how much faith do you have in what your mind tells you?
Patricia says not much.
So if you were to put that as a percentage, Patricia, would you pick something 0 to 100 just for fun? I'm asking for numbers, ladies and gentlemen.
Yes, Dave's also going to the, it depends.
Yeah.
Okay, we got Patricia's naming 20, Michelle saying 95. Anita, before I can think about it, 100%. And we've got here as well, Michael, and naming here 40%, Michael and Kristen. So
okay, thank you. Yeah.
Dave saying 50-50.
Okay.
Well, and it is true a little bit what Dave's saying. There's moments or contexts where we're going to get really stuck in our belief.
Yeah.
Other times less so. Maybe we don't have emotional wounding below it, so it's easier. Yeah, it's a great point.
But it's really nice to pull back and just think about, how much am I trusting my mind? And I certainly came from a very strong orientation of trusting your mind, using your mind. My dad used to say, think, Lynn, think. And what he really meant was think differently because you're not getting the right answer. But all aside, So when we were thinking about this, what we realized is if this is a continuum 0 to 100, that if you're in the 0 to 30% of not trusting your mind, then the odds are you're going to be questioning, doubting, going around in circles, perhaps doing that downward spiral. And that can often reflect some insecurity, not really trusting your mind. But on the other end of the continuum, if you're in the 80, 90, 100%, then it's possible you're also in a category where you're trusting your mind so strongly, you believe what it says is true. And that can have an element of perhaps arrogance or whatever. The real thing that we're looking at today is what about us that are in the middle? And what's beautiful about being in that middle area is it usually means you're open to questioning yourself, your mind. Do I really know? You're open to learning and you're able to learn. Because if you're in that less than 30%, the fear that's going to be in your system will block learning, because you'll be doubting, questioning, is it me? Is it them? Et cetera, et cetera. That'll get in the way. So being somewhere between 30 and 80% is a great place to be. Now, today we're going to be looking at kind of the mechanics of how your mind lies to you. And we're going to be focusing on 3 different patterns that the mind does: distorting, diminishing, and deleting. Now, what's really interesting is this is a tricky thing to tackle. It's like trying to go in and do your own dental surgery. We're trying to go in and look at our mind and identify its patterns while doing them, so to speak. So it's not that simple. And so we decided to make today a little different format and structure. We're going to do 3 different demos and offer you the chance to see what you notice and so on. And you're not going to do your own skill building sheet in this session, but you will get a skill building sheet so that you can do that later and you can really reflect on this topic of how is my mind working? How are these 3 patterns that are universal of distortion, deleting, and diminishing showing up? Okay, so I think that that's all that I wanted you to know as we get started here.
Perfect. And before I go, I'd like, Leslie, is there anything in the chat to share?
Oh,
Where we got lots of those numbers in, and lots of that acknowledging around the context, right? That how much
Yeah.
trust I put in my mind is going to depend a lot on what's happening in that moment and what the context of the situation is.
I
Excellent.
would like to just add in honor that if you're in your area of expertise or your area of brilliance or competence or whatever you think, you're in the zone, you're going to have a lot more confidence in your experience and what you know and so on. But we're doing a kind of big pullback, include everything from friends and partners and kids and grandkids and the whole shebang. Yeah. Thanks.
So today, like Lynn shared, we're doing a bit of a different format, and we're going to give 3 role play examples of the ways that our mind distorts, deletes, or diminishes. And what I would like to offer and invite all of you is to really be able to feel into it. We're hoping for you to get a visceral experience of each of these 3Ds. And so we're also going to get you to take a moment and write down one, and then you're going to kind of track a little bit of that in the background. So really feel into the examples we give. And before we start, I'd like you to take your piece of paper and think of a moment in your life that's been challenging and write it down.
Just one, Jeff?
Yeah, just one's good. One is important to stick with one. We like to keep it as clean as we can.
And when we say moment, it might be one conversation, it might be, yeah.
Yeah, as a situation.
Yeah.
Give me a thumbs up once you've written something down. Perfect. Excellent. Okay, so I'm going to jump over to the PowerPoint. And we're going to go through our first example. Distorting. So you skew reality by making negatives or positives bigger, or you exaggerate time or consequences by making the consequences bigger or smaller. And Leslie's, we're going to roll through an example here.
Yeah, so I'm going to give you an example of a scenario where I'm engaging in distortion. And so I want you to just imagine that I've sent a vulnerable text. Okay, so I've sent this vulnerable text to a close friend of mine. I've shared some truths. I'm asking for their opinion. But the important thing to note is that it's a vulnerable text. So I'm feeling a little exposed as I share what I share. So I send the message, 5 minutes goes by, no response, and that's okay. I'm thinking to myself, they're probably just busy. Then half an hour goes by, and now I'm thinking, okay, I wonder why they aren't responding. Okay, fair. An hour later, my mind now kicks into overdrive. Okay, so at this point, I'm thinking like, okay, what was the last conversation we had? Was there maybe something that I did or said the last time we were together that pissed them off? Like I'm going backwards in time now, right? Where did I go wrong? And now a few hours pass by. Still no response. Now I'm not even in imagination. I'm like in full catastrophizing, right? I'm thinking, okay, that's it. They're ignoring me. I've done something wrong. Somehow I've ruined the friendship. They hate me. They're probably talking to somebody else about how much they hate me right now and how annoying this particular text is, right? Yeah, my mind is all over. I don't even sleep well that night. I wake up the next morning, a text rolls in. Hey, I'm so sorry I was swamped yesterday. What's up? And scene.
Thank you, Leslie. That's excellent. So what we'd like to do now as a group is look at what are the ways that Leslie was distorting. And I'll put the slide back up for a moment. In what ways, in her example, was she skewing reality to be either making the negatives or positives bigger, maybe exaggerating time, or exaggerating consequences? I'd love you to put in the chat the ways that you saw that she was distorting, or put your hand up and I will call on you to share verbally.
Patricia.
Well, I can relate to that. Major assumption. We just make an assumption that the person doesn't want to talk to us, or that, they didn't, they have a negative reaction to our comment when they didn't even get it yet because they didn't get it yet. So, and I've done that, so I know. Yeah, assumption's a big one.
Yes.
Definitely. Yeah, you're going to see assumption that play out in all of these scenarios. It's very true, Patricia. So
And
what are some other ways that she distorted? Oh, go ahead, Leslie.
Michelle's naming the delay in response, right? So I'm distorting that delay in time. Anita's sharing that I'm making up a story about the other person and blowing the negative feeling out of proportion. So I'm distorting those negative feelings. Right. Beautiful. Great. What else am I distorting?
Anything else come to mind when you think about it?
Maybe you're distorting the situation itself.
Yeah. The situation itself, Shirley sharing, I'm making up a story, they don't like me. So I'm distorting how they're perceiving me. I'm making assumptions. I'm exaggerating their perception, right? Again, Michael and Kirsten naming that I'm distorting what the other person is feeling, right? Absolutely.
I like on Shirley's toss as well. You're distorting even the relationship itself. Like, oh, maybe the relationship's not as good as I thought it was, and you're going into that fearful place.
Right. And Michelle's naming, the way that my friend was going to respond and expecting it to not go over well. Right. I'm anticipating bad.
Good catch.
Absolutely. Really good. So shifting gears, what are the costs that Leslie might pay for showing up this way in this situations when they're distorting? What are the costs? And again, please put them in the chat or raise your hand and Leslie or I'll call on you. Yeah.
Sarah's naming the lowered self-esteem. Sonia, she's sharing that having grown up with emotional abuse, it can be easy to assume the worst. Absolutely, right? Our mind becomes very good at tracking and anticipating that. It keeps us safe, right? Anita's saying, pushing my friend away. Patricia's naming the stress and imbalance for sure, right? That takes a toll on the system. Michael and Kirsten also pointing out stress and anxiety. Michelle, great point. Brain space, right? I can't stay present and be objective. Absolutely. Great catch. Unnecessary stress, most definitely. And Sarah's naming the beating myself up, right? And ruminating it and all of that culminating into more stress in the system.
Excellent. Those are
Not
great.
to mention a very poor sleep at night, right? Like that's a huge impact too.
Well, and with all of these examples, so even with the sleep, so then think about the costs the next day. When I don't get enough sleep, what are the costs of that? And when my system is stressed, what are the costs in our physical health and well-being when we're experiencing stress like that, right? We're naming the direct costs, which is great. And each one of those direct costs leads to more costs in and of itself.
Yeah, ripples out.
Like you said with the brain space, Michelle was saying, I mean, how good is your focus now on the other things in your life when this issue is running in the background and there's stress around it, of course, is worrying. So great points, everybody. So now we're going to shift gears and we're going to look at what are some of the facts in the situation. Take a moment and see if you can pinpoint a few facts and put them into the chat. Or again, put your hand up and share.
Got lots of assumptions running. So what are the facts? Yeah, so Michael and Kirsten, she didn't answer quickly. And I would even argue that even there, we got a little bit of distortion happening, right? So rather than saying she didn't answer quickly, she hasn't answered yet, right? Quickly could be subjective, right? How do I know what's quick, what's slow, right? Again, there's some assumption in there. Sarah's saying fact, she sent a message to her friend who didn't respond right away. Great. Factual, right? I can watch a playback of me doing those things and see it happening, right? Anita's also naming that I sent a text about how I was feeling and I wanted a response ASAP. Yes, I was looking for a quick response, wasn't I? Good catch.
Good catch.
I'd just like to check with Michael and Kristen. How did it land for you when Leslie was pointing out the opinion that was in your guys's fact? You're on mute.
Yeah, he's landing okay. Yeah.
Okay.
And just to acknowledge, they are currently in the airport waiting room, if you didn't catch that in the chat. So their level of vocal engagement may be different. We won't take it personally.
We could hear all the announcements on the airline.
Yeah, Patricia.
Taking it personally, that's part of the problem. She took the fact that her friend didn't respond right away personally and making that assumption that something was wrong about it. And I think assumptions, expectations, and attachments are the biggies for me. And I'm aware of that. You know, I make an assumption, I have an expectation that it's going to be the way I think it should be, or my monkey mind thinks it should be, and then I'm attached. So when it doesn't happen, of course, I'm then disappointed, which comes from fear of it not happening anyway. So it's like a vicious cycle.
That is the big picture of how the mind lies to us. Thank you. I guess the last one we would say here too, for another possible fact, if it wasn't said, we don't know that, sorry, Leslie doesn't know the other person received it.
Ah, true. The fact is she sent it.
That's right.
That's all we know.
That's right.
Okay, so we're going to shift gears now from facts, and we're going to go look at, in hindsight, with all of this information, how Leslie, how might you view it differently?
Well, I think the facts that we've identified, right, immediately allow me to take a breath and maybe pull back a little second, right? And so I might acknowledge what I don't know. So I think for me, the first step in this particular scenario is to just acknowledge what does feel like a reasonable time, right? I really need to think to myself, okay, I know what I want, which is I want the response the second I send the question. And if I just pause and think a little more objectively in the moment, what feels like a normal timeline for a text response? I might even look at how our normal conversations go. Like, is it a typical pattern that this person responds right away? And in this case, no. The typical pattern is there's a bit of a wait time, right? So I'll consider maybe identifying what feels like a reasonable time and commit to, like, I don't have to worry until I reach this point. And now if I reach this point, I can make a different choice. I can follow up, and maybe in a different way, right? Maybe pick up the phone and instead of send a text message. Because the other thing that I know is that the words that I say or type are only a small portion of the full message, right? Lots of room for assumptions and misinterpretation when we're communicating via text message, especially, right? So I might recognize maybe this is more important than a text message will serve. Right?
Jeff, you're on mute.
Sorry, Steph. Yes.
Oh, thank you, Leslie. Excellent. And now we're going to shift to the next example, moving from distortion to diminish. So reducing the intensity of feelings, thoughts, or the situation. And Lynn will do a little role play for us on this one.
So I'd like you to imagine I'm sitting down for my performance review with my manager. And my manager starts with giving me a lot of positives on the contributions I've made, the things he's noticed, and, continues to say, what a great job I've done. Really, like, in his opinion, that I have made a significant difference, and that without my leadership, we probably wouldn't have done as well in this quarter as we have done. And then he ends by saying, I hope you're really proud of what you've accomplished. Well, inside, I'm thinking, I'm just doing my job. Like, this is all part of what I should be doing. And it's nice to hear that stuff. But, when you do a performance review, I think I should get some negatives or feedback or what I should be changing. Anyway, then I arrive home and my partner says to me, I hear you had a great performance review. And I'm like, how the heck did you hear that? Well, he knows so-and-so who knows so-and-so who is raving. And so he too says, so you must feel great about how you're doing. And I'm like, I did okay. But I really don't get why people are making such a big deal of all this. End of scenario.
Okay, so what is Lynn diminishing in this example? You can share or drop it in the chat, but what are some of the elements? Okay, so Sarah's naming, she's diminishing her accomplishments. Absolutely. Patricia's naming that you're diminishing your self-worth. Sarah's similarly saying you're diminishing your value. Absolutely. Anita's naming you're diminishing your abilities, right? Absolutely. And what else might she be diminishing besides this flavor of that? Yeah, diminishing the compliments. Dave's saying she's diminishing the contribution. Absolutely, right? Yeah. She's also, in a sense, diminishing her boss's integrity, right? She's making this sort of story where there's, an inflated perspective being shared, and therefore that means she's diminishing who this person is, right? Michael and Kirsten naming diminishing her feelings of what other people think of her. And Patricia, yeah, her manager's integrity. Absolutely. Right? That's great. So again, then let's think about if this is what Lynn is diminishing, what are the costs in this scenario that Lynn's paying? So what does this diminishment cost her? Yeah, Michael and Kirsten, self-esteem goes down.
Mhm.
Absolutely. I am getting what, or Lynn's getting what should be an esteem builder, and she's just shooting it right out of the sky, right? Nope, pass, right? Michelle's saying the cost is in her efforts, and Patricia's naming the lack of self-love. Absolutely, for sure. What are some other costs that she would pay here? What are the costs of lowered self-esteem or lacking that self-love or worth?
I don't know how to write this or paraphrase this, but I almost feel like it's the cost of not appreciating what she's done or what she's contributed, and that I don't know, like it's, I guess, around the self-love component maybe, or something else. I don't know. It doesn't quite feel like self-love, but something more where you're just not even recognizing what you've done and what you've accomplished. I don't know. How would you describe that, Leslie?
Well, I'm even picking up in what you're saying, Rochelle, that flavor of like, Lynn's making a contribution and she's not connected to that contribution,
Yeah.
right? There's a real,
Yeah, like that disconnect in that sense of reality, I guess. Yeah.
yeah, absolutely. And Dave's mentioning here, like the learning and growth moment out the window, right? Patricia's naming the separation. Anita's naming the always feeling small and perhaps not being seen. Or Sarah saying she doesn't fully receive and therefore doesn't get to actually feel and embody those compliments. So she's missing out on this gift of juicy, like, wow, look at all I've done, right? Shirley's naming that lack of feeling how much she was appreciated and not celebrating that contribution, right? How many of you are guilty of not celebrating your wins and your contributions?
Oh,
Okay. Oh, there goes that automatic hand up feature. Sorry. And Sonia's saying, I'm Sonia's still triggered by the behind the back talking about me, right? And even notice that, Sonia, right? Here's people sharing good news about me in the background, and I've got a negative feeling about that, right? That really speaks to that lack of safety in the system, right?
I would
Very
offer
good.
another cost here is from the boss's perspective, Lynn's done great in this project. She doesn't own it or have the confidence. What's the likelihood of him helping her move up the ladder or going, she's doing great work, but she's not quite there yet. I can't promote her.
Mm. And how can she repeat it if she's not owning what she did? Sorry, Lynn.
Well, I'd like to pick up on the separation word, Patricia. What I was also tuning in when I did, I'm pulling away from people like my partner who gave me, I'm not stepping in and getting a glorious hug and celebration kiss. I'm pulling back, and I'm pulling back energetically from my boss. And I might even, somebody said, pull back Sonia, like, yeah, and who else is talking to me? So now I might even go into some protection. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
And Anita's naming that this is a pattern for her, right? I don't feel comfortable when I get the compliments. The good stuff is hard to hear. So I'd rather hide and say, oh, it was nothing, right? That's that perfect example of that diminishing pattern,
yeah,
right? And what we're naming here is there's some big costs,
yeah.
big costs. Okay, so in hindsight then, Lynn,
Mhm.
or actually before I go there, sorry, what would be some facts?
Yeah.
Let's talk about the facts in this situation. What do we know is true? Yeah, we do know that. Michelle's naming, we know she did well. Yeah.
Mhm.
We know
Evidence
her boss said it.
suggests.
Yeah, we know her boss said she did well.
Yeah.
True, very true.
Yeah, we know her boss is saying she did well, that Lynn did an exceptional job. Dave, good one. We know that it was so good. People were talking about it, right? Fact is, she was recognized by her boss for her performance, and she thought it wasn't much of anything. Also true, Sarah. Yeah. Anita, great. This is another nice addition. So people like what she's doing, and her partner is proud of her. Also a fact. Beautiful. And Patricia's naming that a fact is she dissed her performance, right? She went, yeah, I don't know why it's such a big deal. I did okay. I'm just doing my job, right? Absolutely. So then with those facts in play and hindsight, Lynn, how might you look at this situation a little differently?
Mhm. It's really interesting in terms of, can I take, what was shared and nurture myself and let myself feel good about it, and as opposed to being nervous of it and not wanting to let it land, not wanting to feel good about myself. So, in this kind of scenario, a person might have a belief of, if I start to feel good, somebody's going to take me down. So I'll just stay down. Um, but in hindsight, I mean, it's heartbreaking not to celebrate and take in all that delicious goodness and use it to keep doing a great job and being close to my partner. So I could really feel, by playing this particular role, how I separate and distance, and as you say, diminish both myself, other people, and my accomplishments, almost diminishing my job. Like if it's no big deal what I did, there's a way I'm almost diminishing even the job.
Yeah. Right. And that's a really interesting point, because how many of you ever had that experience where someone diminishes something about themselves and now suddenly it's like, oh, well, then I guess I don't have permission to celebrate that in me. Right. It's almost like it changes what I feel like I'm allowed to do. Right. So that there's another cost. Right. And Sonia's just naming here, Lynn, that she can really relate to that anticipation of being knocked down. Right. And so
Leslie, one other insight I just had from my childhood is when somebody gets an A in school and they say it's no big deal. And it was like, oh my God, I'm so proud of my C because of the struggles I had. And they're making their A no big deal. It's like, it's hopeless. Like I go even lower with my little puny C. So that just rang a bell when you said that.
yeah.
Mhm.
And so then with these pieces of understanding and seeing some of those facts, then how might you choose to show up differently, Lynn?
I think if I were being true to this character, I could say to my partner, it's really hard to hear all this good stuff, but thank you for saying it. And I'm really trying to let it in. And I really do want to get the hug and so on. I might be able later to say the next day to my boss that I really did appreciate and I thought about it and come back around.
Yeah. Yeah, Dave.
I just wanted to add like a potential scenario that this could happen because I may have witnessed this before in real life, which is the person receiving the compliment has an incredibly high standard for themselves. And although the person, the boss, is giving a compliment and the organization is witnessing what they're doing, the personal standard is so high that it doesn't actually penetrate their being.
Yeah.
So that I could see that scenario playing out. I've also seen the flip side where someone gets a compliment and they take it to the bank every day and they make a career around it. And you know what I mean? Where you're like, dude, like that story, it's old. Like it happened a long time ago. But so I've seen the flip side. I've seen it where someone has such a personal high standard they won't take a compliment. And then on the flip side, I've seen them take the compliment and make a career around it as well. So
Yeah,
You're
great.
really speaking into the D's, Dave, the
Mhm.
distortion, the
Yeah.
disminution, yep, right on the money.
Yep.
Absolutely.
And
Um,
I may know someone that has done some of those things.
and I think what's also nope, my thought just left. So Anita's sharing. I also feel bad when I try to build my friend up and she diminishes everything. Then I start feeling I'm not good enough because I can't get her to see all the good things. Great. And Michelle's asking the question, is diminished linked to not feeling safe as opposed to self-worth?
Wow, what a powerful question. We think all of these patterns reflect some beliefs underneath. And as Patricia was saying, or you could go to a bigger umbrella of assumptions and interpretations and so on and expectations. But they're all going to influence self-worth, aren't they? And then self-worth is going to influence the patterns, is the first thought that comes to my mind.
Yeah, and I would support that, Lynn, saying basically the nervous system's in protection mode, so you're not feeling safe in any of these behaviors for sure.
Yeah.
And
Which
I
I
think
think is a surprise, isn't it, Jeff, when people will say, of course I'm safe. What are you talking about? Like we live in Canada or whatever. Like they're looking at such a baseline of, but emotional safety is an entirely different matter.
Well, and what was interesting for me as I was thinking about how you might show up differently, one step that I've been learning to take in these sort of scenarios is to ask myself, why am I blocking this?
Mm.
What is it about me that's wanting to keep this from penetrating? That's such a great word, Dave, right? It's like it's all out there and I'm just not letting it in. So what's going on there? What is that about? Right? Really getting curious, because that's where we open ourselves up to new learning, right? And understanding.
Yeah, and if we follow the safety line that Michelle's asking, the question could be, what am I afraid of? Same idea, same kind of concept.
Yeah.
Okay,
That's
so let's
beautiful.
talk to the last D,
Yeah.
delete. So ignoring critical information that doesn't align with your perceptions, your beliefs, or your desires. So let's imagine my scenario. I have a friend who cancels on me last minute again. And I was really looking forward to seeing them, but I go into my mind thinking, whatever, they're probably just busy. And so something inside me kind of calms a little, and then my mind brushes it off and goes, it's no big deal. So a couple weeks later, this happens again. I've been waiting to move this couch, and my friend messaged me last minute, hey, I ain't gonna be able to make it. Again, bails on me. And I do some of the similar pattern of like, it's not a big deal. They got a lot going on in their life. I'm talking with a friend, and a friend shares with me, hey, doesn't this bother you? Like they do this a lot. I mean, it seems to me like in the last 6 months, they bailed on everything. And to that, I respond with a defensive place of like, well, no, they don't bail on everything. Like, there's times they come through, they just have a lot going on in their life. I totally get it. Totally get it. And as I do this, that little uncomfortable feeling in me, in my body starts to fade, starts to get repressed. But as time passes and I keep sweeping the stuff under the rug, the excuses pile up and the disappointment in me gets stronger. But I really don't notice it a lot because I've trained myself to not notice it. And so that's the end of scene for me.
Thank you, Jeff. So, would you please put in the chat, what was Jeff deleting? Or you can put your hands up, whichever is easier.
So Sarah is naming that he deleted the fact that his friend didn't follow through on his commitment. Dave, great catch, Dave. Dave's naming he's deleting his disappointment. Yep, Michael and Kirsten deleting his negative feelings about being stood up. Yes, Anita saying he's deleting that his friend is always bailing. Shirley saying he's deleting his feelings. Patricia deleting his feelings of disappointment. Yeah, great. Great.
Mhm.
Katie naming, yep, deleting his feelings big time. Absolutely. Mhm.
And if we look even further, just take a minute to feel into, is there any other aspect of the deleting? I was just thinking in terms again of trust in the relationship.
Mm.
So we're going to look now, what are the costs that Jeff pays for doing this pattern of just deleting information? It's no big deal.
He's lying to himself.
And what's the cost of that, Patricia?
Well, it furthers separation, lack of trust and self-worth. I mean, it really reflects what's behind the facade, what's really behind the facade, which is everything we spoke of earlier, lack of self-worth, separation. It really includes the other two, distortion and diminishing in a way.
Good observation. Thank you. Okay.
Dave's also naming, yeah, that the self-esteem would be suffering here. Michael and Kirsten, you know, he's actually setting himself up for future disappointment, right? He might ask again and be disappointed again, furthering the discomfort. And Gemma's asking a great question here. She's wondering, is deleting the same as shutting down or tuning out?
Yeah.
There's definitely an element of tuning out, for sure.
Mhm.
Tuning out from information I just don't want to hear, you know?
How
Yeah.
I might answer that is we're looking at the patterns the mind does, but the shutting down is a full body. So it's going even further to the whole action embodiment based on what's been deleted.
Okay, can I just ask a question about that then?
Sure.
For me, what happens is if something comes up that I'm uncomfortable with or is out of my comfort zone or whatever, what happens literally in my mind is nothing. Nothing happens. No, I don't have conversations. I don't beat myself up. I don't beat the other person up. Nothing. I just go blank. So how I know I'm in trouble is when my partner says to me, "How do you feel?" And I say, "I feel okay. I don't feel anything." That's my tell right there. I'm in trouble. I do feel something. I just have no concept of how to get to it. And if I do get to it, am I going to be abandoned? Am I going to be hurt? Or am I going to lose something that I've up until that point cherished?
That's right. And Gemma, the only fine tuning I would offer is your mind does do something. It goes blank. It pushes the button and the whole screen goes blank. You got no thought. You can't think of a single thing.
Yep.
That's right. But going blank is what the mind is doing to protect.
Yeah. And if you think about that on the in terms of like where your system is at, that's a freeze response.
It is.
Right? That is me at the bottom of the ladder of regulation, right?
Yeah.
I was going to say in the shutdown too, the way you linked it, Lynn, it is the end result of any of these things when we get to our full shutdown in our system. So if we realize we're there, we've missed a bunch of points along the way that led up to that. It's a great question, Gemma.
Yeah. And so, oh, sorry,
thanks,
was someone, Lynn,
No.
were you going to say something? Sorry. So I just want to,
I
was just going to go back to the chat.
Good.
So we had Anita just saying that some of the other costs here. So Jeff's making himself a doormat, not just with his friend, but with others, right? He's inviting that behavior for sure. Sarah's naming, setting himself up for future disappointment. And Gemma, just in case you haven't seen it, Anita's just acknowledging this is the same pattern that she sees play out with herself for sure. So we're I think many of us have experienced that full shutdown at one point or another.
There's a cost here too for me of like an opportunity for learning is being lost, being missed when I'm in the pattern of deleting or pushing information away.
And Jem is asking the question, which I would say for sure in this scenario, she's saying, is this also a form of people pleasing? And in this case, definitely.
Good observation.
And for me, what would keep me in this pattern is my back into my past. There's a distorted type of loyalty that, you know, I'm coding loyalty as something that is now I'm blanketing all these scenarios. And so now I'm going, well, I'm just being loyal. It's a good friend and that's okay. I need to be understanding, but I'm absolutely betraying myself with this distorted sense of loyalty.
That's why we spoke earlier about there's beliefs underpinning these. And so when we look at our stuck triangle and inner balance, you know, that belief is what's going to keep Jeff in a loyalty. He's going to behave that way, and he's going to keep a recurring pattern going because of how he makes sense of that word loyalty.
So true.
So we were just on the costs. The other thing that came to mind is integrity, Jeff. So that could be a cost that would go on for you. So facts. What are the facts we've got in this situation?
So friend bailed. That is a fact. Yes. Jeff asked, another fact from Dave. Jeff asked for help. Great fact to catch. Right? Absolutely. Katie's naming, he cancels a lot. Yes, it seems like that is a fact. And I want to congratulate Katie on choosing a lot versus always, right? We've got to be mindful of those definitive always or never, which are another distortion, really, right? Love that. And then Sarah's, again, really succinctly going to the facts. So Jeff asked his friend for help moving the couch, and friend agreed. When the day came, he canceled. Fact, fact, fact. Jeff's other friend is trying to point out how he perceives this friend to continually do this, right? So another fact would be this other friend naming their perceptions.
Beautiful. Good. So now, Jeff.
I would offer, Lynn, before
one more. Okay.
The fact that I am making excuses for his behavior.
That's true. That is a fact. You did make an excuse.
And the other fact is, I don't know why he does it.
Right. Yeah. We do not know that. So Jeff, in hindsight, when you let yourself kind of feel into what you don't know, some of these facts of why and so forth and what you've been blocking, how would you look at the situation differently now? What arises?
I would bring in all this information, just see like, okay, like first of all, looking at my own behavior, I've got a distorted sense of loyalty, which has me now deleting or distorting information so that I can keep the friendship, keep the connection, even though the behavior they're doing is less than ideal and actually on some level painful. And so taking all that in, I would start to say, okay, this is a regular pattern that happens with this person. Do I want a relationship with them? Yes, I do. So now knowing all of this, how can I show up differently? What would I do differently? And that would lead us to the next question.
Yeah, which is, how would you show up differently?
Yeah, then I would want to have a conversation with him and just talk about what's going on for me and ask questions, understand what goes on for him so that we can learn together and correct the situation and let him know, like, this is a pattern that I want to work on in my life and getting rid of. And it might be the same for him. He might realize, actually, I do this with a lot of people too. So I didn't realize how it's landing for everyone. And so that's how I would do differently.
Good. Thank you very much. Okay, Leslie.
Yeah. Well, and so I'm curious then, as each of you, hopefully you've sort of been holding that situation in your own life somewhere in the back of your mind. And so what are you noticing as we talk about these three different patterns of distorting, diminishing, and deleting? What's coming up for you?
It's part of the human experience, for one thing.
Thank you. We're all in it together.
It's so important to name, right? We're not alone. If we are doing these patterns, we're fitting in, right? And Sarah's naming this. She's noticing that I absolutely diminish compliments.
Mhm.
Great awareness. And Michael and Kirsten are naming they distort regularly. Great awareness. It's so important that we start to build the awareness, because we can't change or affect anything we're unaware of, right? And Michelle's making a great point here, right? These are all blocking mechanisms, right? And Gemma's naming that I'm more open to discuss head on with friends, but family issues are still a complete stall, right? Great differentiation there.
Yeah.
And Dave's saying, I see it happening more often as the stakes feel higher.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And so has anyone been able to identify which one of these three is playing out more strongly in your situation that you identified? And as you reflect on that, I'm just noticing Anita's making a great comment here. I feel anxious about this in my body. I know I diminish compliments, and I am a huge people pleaser and keep things that bug me quiet. And I've been using this reference a ton. I find it so helpful to consider this as like white noise in your system, right? So imagine all those things that I'm not letting in, that I'm working on diminishing, distorting, or deleting, right? If there's things that bug me and I'm keeping those quiet, they don't go away, right? So all of those things that you aren't sharing are still in your system, swirling around like white noise, pulling your attention and focus, right?
I think I'd like to link to the bigger picture of our work for a moment too. And
Yeah.
notice, like, when we're doing these 3Ds, we are in the constructed identity. It doesn't mean that there's not something to address in the world. It's if we address it from the place of our nervous system in protection mode, and our mind is lying to us and tricking us, we're going to be in the stuck triangle. If we're able to relax and become more flexible in the moment, maybe move into our authentic self, we're still going to address the issue, but now we're going to come from a place of honesty and congruency, and the challenge will unfold, but not from a place of fear or trying to control or take over or shutting down and running away.
And I would say just attending today is a powerful opportunity for you're adding information that can allow you. It's not about magically fixing it all, but just like each of us in the scenarios, when we add information, when we get to the facts, when we realize what we're diminishing or distorting, it allows our system to come a bit more into balance. And if we can just be happy with that little step forward, I really feel you, Anita, in terms of what you're saying, the anxiety coming up. But the answer isn't to try to fix it right now. The answer is just to be a little more aware of how it's going on. Which may not be the answer you want to hear, but little steps will take you forward. Okay.
And notice just how it feels in your system to be noticing these patterns at play, to be able to name, oh, I am doing this, that, or the other, or all three, right? And just notice how that feels, how that lands in your system.
And just to let you know as well, we'll send out an email with a link to this video, and in it, there'll be a worksheet that walks through what we've done here. So you don't need to make any notes on the questions or any of that. The worksheet will have all of it laid out.
Thanks.
And again, we made a really conscious choice with this one, not to have you do the work in session, because we know the value of taking the time with this one, right? Our mind is tricky. So really slowing down and allowing yourself to feel into what's the pattern at play and what are you paying for that pattern, right? We don't focus on the costs as a way of beating ourselves up, but rather as a way to motivate ourselves, to help us understand how important this is for us to take a look at, right?
Yeah, there's a myth, I think, out that many people feel they're really quite self-aware. And probably societally, we're in an era where people are far more self-aware. But there's a psychologist, Tasha Eurich, did 5 years of research. And what she found is 95% of people think they're self-aware, but only 10 to 15% actually were. So all of us can stretch into what are we missing, open up a little more curiosity, learn to bring ourselves into balance so we can take in new information and start to leverage it. Yeah. So Leslie, yeah.
So moving to the group, what was your
Yeah.
biggest takeaway from today? What stood out for you? I know we only have a couple minutes before we
Yeah.
close out, but I'd love to hear what landed well for you. Or what did you find surprising?
I want to name what Gemma's got in the chat here. She said, thank you for that, because I have to pull it all apart right now. I will have nothing if I have to do that, which tells me I got a lot. Yeah. There's a really good chance if any of you are sitting here, which I don't think you are, but if you're sitting here thinking, I don't do that. That's probably another version of deleting or diminishing or distorting. Yeah. And Shirley's just naming that it really resonates with their journey today. So that's great. Yeah. And Sonia loves how this is dovetailing with the work in the inner balance course. So I'm glad that's feeling supportive, Sonia. And Gemma saying her biggest takeaway was just the people pleasing aspect, which is great awareness.
I love what Katie's saying. I know I listen to my mind more than I should. I always thought my mind was right. I so get you, Katie. Oh my goodness. So yay. Appreciate that this was helpful.
Yes, and Anita acknowledging this is nice to see I'm not alone in this. And again, that's one of the beautiful pieces of learning in community, right? I think it's very easy for us to also distort and think that we're the only people experiencing what we're experiencing, which is never, oh, I said it, but never true. All right. Wonderful.
We only have a minute or two left, but Patricia, if you can squeeze something in, we'd love to hear your thoughts.
You know, I can relate to all of these to some extent. And to me, it's the imposter syndrome, that we're not acknowledging our true self, our true authenticity, and our identity. Therefore, what do? We go into perfectionism and paralysis, people pleasing, and procrastination. And really, you know, all of those can be applied to what you shared today: distortion, diminishing, and deleting. And I would also add a fourth D, delusion.
Oh, thank you.
We move into deluding ourselves about these things instead of seeing the delusion as an opportunity to say, no, I'm not going to be deluded. I'm going to hold it as a vision. Other people may think I'm deluded, you know. So to me, there's a fourth D in there as well.
Did we do deflection?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Excellent. Now they're morphing. But
We can
Patricia,
make
I
a
just
huge
want to
list.
say,
So we make a huge list of all the ways our mind lies to us. That's becoming evident. Go ahead, Lynn.
but the skill of starting to understand your mind and being able to manage it effectively is enormously important. People want to make the big jump to their authentic identity and live there all the time. It's not going to happen without capability of managing your mind, knowing how to go out of balance, but bring yourself back, and all of those pieces. So it's really a powerful area of skill building that I know is the underpinning for the kind of growth people want, and certainly the people that are on this kind of a table talk.
And like Sonia said, when we get into week 2 of inner balance, we go deeply into one of these patterns.
Yeah.
How to switch your thinking, realize when you're caught in the negative, move to a neutral, move to a positive in a healthy way, not in a Pollyanna dismissive way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Beautiful. Well, another great table talk. Thank you all so much for being here, for being part of the conversation. For those of you doing this at home, good luck. And of course, as always, anytime if you need support working through this skill building page, if more questions pop up, please don't hesitate to reach out to us at hello@expandingyou.com. We're always excited to be of support. So thanks for sharing an hour with us today. It was a pleasure.
Thank
Look
you
forward
all.
to seeing you in March.
Yes, integrity will be our next hot topic.
Yeah.
Oh,
So
Ooh.
earmark that one.
Thank you,
thank you
everyone.
all very much. Thank you.
You all
Bye.
wonderful.